This is the story of the Norse settlement of Iceland, not the story of kings or conquerors, but of farmers and healers, navigators and iron workers, grandmothers and children, people who packed their lives into wooden ships and trusted the sea to carry them towards something new. It is the late 9th century. The year, as best as anyone can reckon it, is around 874, and we begin not on the ocean, not yet, but in the deep green fjordlands of western Norway, where the mountains come down to the water like sleeping giants, and the farms cling to the narrow strips of fertile earth between stone and sea. Let us go there now. Let the modern world fall away. Feel the cool northern air on your skin. Hear the sound of water, always water, trickling down from snowfields, lapping against wooden hulls, rushing through river stones. Smell wood smoke and damp earth and the salt carried inland on the wind. This is where our story begins, and this is where we will meet the people who will carry us through the night. Picture a farmstead set into the slope above a long, narrow fjord. The water below is deep and dark, reflecting the forested mountains on either side like a mirror laid upon the earth. It is late summer. The grass is still green. The birch leaves have not yet begun to turn, and the days are long, though they are growing shorter now, a little more each evening. The light lingers in a way that feels almost reluctant, as though the sun itself is not quite ready to let go. This is the home of Sigrig, a Godi, a chieftain priest of the district. He is not a king, not a warrior of legend. He is a man of middle years, broad-shouldered and deliberate, with deep-set eyes and a voice that carries without needing to be raised. As Godi, he is the one his people come to when disputes need settling, when the old rites need performing, when the community requires someone to speak on its behalf. He wears a heavy arm ring of twisted silver, the mark of his oath and his office, and he carries the weight of his people's trust the way a tree carries the weight of its branches, not as a burden, but as the shape of what he is. Beside him in all things is Randveig. She is his partner, his counselor, and in many quiet ways the one who sees what he does not. Where Sigrid looks outward, toward the horizon, toward the assembly, toward the needs of the many, Randveig looks inward, into the hearts of individual people, into the health of a household, into the silences between words. She has a calm, knowing manner, and when she speaks, even the most restless men in the hall grow still. She manages the stores, the livestock, the rhythm of the farm. Nothing moves through this household without passing through her attention. They have lived here for many years. Their hall is long and low, built of timber and turf, warm with the smell of hearth smoke and dried herbs. The high seat pillars, the ondugi, stand on either side of Sigrig's chair, carved with the likeness of Freyr and Freya, the old gods of fertility and good fortune. These pillars are more than decoration. They are the spiritual anchors of the household, the physical symbols of a family's place in the world, and it is these pillars that tell you something has changed, because the household is beginning to take them down. To understand why, you must understand what has been happening in Norway. Slowly, over years, the old way of life has been tightening like a knot. A powerful chieftain from the east, King Harald, called Fairhair by some, has been drawing all of Norway under a single rule. One by one, the independent chieftains and petty kings have been forced to submit to swear oaths, to surrender their ancestral right to govern their own lands. Harald's men collect taxes now. Harald's men administer the law, the ancient right of odal, the right of free men to own and pass down their own land, has been quietly, steadily eroded. For a man like Sigrid, this is not simply a political inconvenience. It is a remaking of the world. He was raised to believe that a free man answers to his own honor, to his community, and to the gods, not to a distant king. His father held this land. His grandfather cleared it. The thought of bending his knee and calling it someone else's, of paying tribute for the privilege of farming soil his family has worked for generations, it sits in his chest like a stone. And so, over the course of many seasons, a quiet decision has taken shape. Sigrid has spoken with travelers, with traders, with men who have sailed far to the west and returned with stories of an island, large, green, and utterly empty. No king rules there, no taxes are collected. The land is unclaimed, open, and waiting. They call it Eland, Iceland, though the men who have been there say the name is misleading. There are glaciers, yes, and winters that bite, but also wide valleys of green grass, rivers full of fish, and coastlines rich with seals and seabirds. There are hot springs that steam in the cold air, and meadowlands that stretch farther than any single man could walk in a day. He has spoken of this with Randveig late at night when the hall is quiet and the fire burns low. He has spoken of it with a care that reveals how deeply the question troubles him. To leave is to abandon the graves of his ancestors. To stay is to live beneath another man's hand. Randveig listens. She asks the questions he has not thought to ask, about the children who will travel with them, about the animals who must survive the crossing, about what grows in Icelandic soil and what does not. And when she has heard enough, she tells him simply that a home is not a place. A home is the people within it and the way they choose to live. If they carry the undugi, they carry the home. It is Randveig's clarity that finally steadies him. The decision is made. And so the work begins. A settlement expedition is not a raid, not a trading voyage. It is the uprooting of an entire life. Everything that a household needs to survive, not for a journey but forever, must be loaded onto a ship. Sigrid and Randveig begin gathering what they will need, and the list seems endless. There are tools, axes and adzes for felling timber, saws for cutting planks, iron nails by the hundred, hammers, chisels, whetstones. There are seeds, barley and oats, the staples of Norse farming, carefully dried and wrapped in oiled cloth. There are animals, sheep, cows, a few horses, chickens, all of which must be kept alive on an open ship for a week or more at sea. There are bolts of woolen cloth, casks of dried fish and salted meat, soapstone cooking pots, spindles, needles, lengths of rope. There are personal treasures too, a carved comb, a brooch of amber, a small wooden figure of Thor. The ship itself is a knarr, a broad, deep-bellied cargo vessel, wider and sturdier than the sleek longships built for raiding. The knarr is made for carrying. It sits lower in the water, with high sides to keep the waves out and a single square sail of heavy wool. It can hold perhaps 30 people and all their goods, along with the livestock, though it will be crowded, and there will be no shelter from wind or rain. Everyone aboard will sleep in the open, wrapped in furs and wool beneath the sky. Let us meet some of the others who will make this journey. There is Olver, the navigator. He is a lean, quiet man with sun-darkened skin and eyes that seem always to be reading something invisible in the sky or the water. He does not talk much among company, but when he does speak, people listen because Olver sees what others do not. He understands the sea the way a poet understands language, not through rules alone, but through a deep, intuitive feel for its rhythms. Olver carries with him a solstein, a sunstone, a pale crystal of calcite that, when held to the sky, reveals the position of the sun even through cloud and fog. He reads the flight of seabirds to judge the distance to land. He watches the color and direction of waves, the temperature of the wind, the behavior of whales. He knows that when fulmars appear, land is within a day's sail, and that when the ocean swell changes its rhythm, you are passing over a shallow bank. These are not tricks. They are the accumulated knowledge of generations, held in the mind of a single man. Olver agreed to navigate this voyage not out of loyalty to Sigrid alone, though they have known each other many years, but because the crossing itself calls to him. The open ocean is where Olver is most fully himself, stripped of everything but observation and response. He does not speak of this poetically. He simply says he would rather be at sea than anywhere else. Then there is Dalla, the healer. She is a woman of perhaps 40 winters, with gray threading through her dark hair and hands that are always busy, sorting dried plants, grinding roots in a small stone mortar, examining a swollen joint or a persistent cough. In the old language, a woman like Dalla might be called a vulva or a knarr, a seer healer, one who works with both herbs and the unseen. She knows which mosses draw out infection, which bark eases fever, which berries must never be eaten, and which ones bring restful sleep. She can set a broken bone and stitch a wound with horsehair thread. She also knows the old chants, the galdrar, the healing songs that are sung low and steady over a patient through the night. People respect Dalla, but they keep a slight distance too. Her knowledge places her somewhat apart. She does not mind this. She has long understood that the healer stands between the world of the well and the world of the suffering, and that this is a threshold most people would rather not linger on. She is making this journey because Sigrid asked her, and because she knows that a settlement without a healer is a settlement that will not last. There is Brynjolf, who does not speak much about his past. He is an iron worker, a man who can take raw bog ore and through fire and force and patience turn it into nails, hinges, knife blades, axe heads, the essential skeleton of civilization. He was born in Ireland, taken as a thrall in his youth, and has lived among Norse people for more than half his life. He is not free, not in the eyes of the law, and yet his skill makes him indispensable. Without Brynjolf, there are no tools. Without tools, there is no settlement. This gives him a complicated kind of standing, valued for what he can do, constrained by what he is. He carries this contradiction quietly, with a dignity that asks nothing of anyone. Sigrid has promised Brynjolf that in the new land his status will change. There will be no kings in Iceland, and a man's worth will be measured by what he contributes, not by the circumstances of his birth. Whether this promise will hold is something only time will tell. But Brynjolf heard it, and he nodded once, and he began packing his tools. And then there are two more, traveling together, Vigdis and Erika. Vigdis is Randveig's distant kinswoman, a great-aunt perhaps, though the exact line of relation has grown tangled with the years. She is old, truly old, perhaps 60 winters or more, which in this age is remarkable. But Vigdis is not frail. She is lean and sharp, with a mind like a blade that has been honed so many times it has grown thin, but cuts all the cleaner for it. She knows the old stories, the genealogies, the laws, the proper way to perform every rite and ritual. She remembers things that younger people have forgotten, and she has the kind of practical wisdom that comes not from books, for there are no books, but from decades of watching, failing, adapting, and surviving. Erika is 11 years old, and she is Vigdis's charge. Erika's parents died when she was young, her father in a dispute that went badly, her mother of a sickness the following winter. Vigdis took her in, and the two of them have formed a bond that runs deeper than obligation. They take care of each other. Vigdis watches over Erika's growth and teaches her the things a young person needs to know. Erika, in turn, is Vigdis's eyes when the light is dim, her steady arm on uneven ground, her memory for small details that the old woman sometimes lets slip. Erika is serious and watchful, with a stillness that belies her age. She does not play as other children play. She observes, she helps, she listens. She has already learned that the world does not always protect you, and this knowledge has made her not fearful, but attentive. These are the people we will follow tonight. There are others in the household, farmhands and tenants, a few other families who have thrown their lot in with Sigrid, perhaps 30 or 40 souls in all. But it is through the eyes of these 6 that we will see the journey unfold. The days of preparation have a strange quality to them, hurried and slow at the same time, busy with practical tasks, but shadowed by the knowledge that each task is being done for the last time. The last harvest from this soil, the last milking of the cows in this byre, the last walk along the familiar path to the fjord's edge. Randveig moves through the farm with quiet purpose, directing the packing, deciding what will come and what must be left behind. Every choice is a small grief. The loom is too heavy. It stays. The iron cauldron is essential. It comes. Her mother's spindle whorl, carved from soapstone and worn smooth by decades of use. It weighs almost nothing, and it comes, tucked into the folds of a woolen blanket. Sigrid walks the boundaries of his land one last time. He goes alone in the early morning, when the mist still hangs in the fjord and the grass is wet with dew. He passes the stones that mark the corners of his fields, the stream where he watered the horses, the stand of birch trees where he played as a boy. He does not linger. He does not weep, but he touches the bark of the oldest tree as he passes just briefly with the flat of his hand. Among the Norse, there is a concept called urlug, the layers of the past that shape the present, the accumulated weight of everything that has come before. Every action, every choice, every life lived on this land has laid down a thread in the great weaving. Sigrid feels those threads now tugging at him, his father's voice, his mother's hands kneading bread, the sound of the goats on the hillside in spring. These things are woven into the earth, and they will remain here when he is gone. But his own thread, his own urlug, is being pulled in a new direction now, and he must follow it. Vigdis, meanwhile, performs her own kind of farewell. She is the keeper of memory in this household, and she knows that when they leave, the stories of this place must travel with them. And so she sits with Erika in the evenings by the dying fire and she tells the old tales, not the great sagas of gods and heroes, but the small local stories. The story of the grandmother who found a spring in the hillside during a drought. The story of the grandfather who built the first wall. The name of every farm along the fjord, and who settled each one, and what happened there. She is planting these stories in Erika's memory like seeds in soil, trusting that the girl will carry them forward. Erika listens with the focus of someone who understands that this matters. She does not fidget. She does not ask to leave. She repeats the names back when Vigdis asks her to, and Vigdis nods, satisfied, or as close to satisfied as she ever gets. There is a final gathering, a blot, a ritual offering, held on the last evening before departure. Sigrid leads it, as is his duty as Godi. A young ram is sacrificed, its blood sprinkled on the altar stones and on the people gathered there, a blessing for the journey ahead. Sigrid speaks to the gods, to Thor, who governs the weather and the sea, to Freyr, who blesses the land and the harvest, to the Nornir, the three sisters who sit at the roots of the great world tree and weave the fates of all living things, Urdur, who governs what has been, Verdandi, who governs what is becoming, Skuld, who governs what must be. He does not ask for safety. The Norse do not ask the gods for guarantees. He asks only that the threads of their fate be woven with purpose, and that whatever comes, they meet it with courage. The fire burns low, the stars come out, tomorrow they sail. The morning of departure is cool and overcast, the sky the color of wet slate. The knarr sits in the shallows of the fjord, already loaded to its waterline with supplies, the livestock penned in the center of the hull with walls of woven wattle to keep them from shifting. The sheep bleat nervously, the cows are wide-eyed and uncertain. A few chickens have been tucked into wicker baskets and lashed to the crossbeams. The people gather on the shore. There are those who are going and those who are staying. Neighbors, friends, a few elderly relatives who are too old or too attached to the land to leave. The farewells are quiet, the Norse way. There are no great speeches, no weeping in public, a hand clasped, a forehead touched to a forehead, a few words spoken low. The old phrase, farvel, farewell, said with a steadiness that does not quite conceal what lies beneath it. Dalla is already aboard, arranging her stores of dried herbs and medicines in an oilskin pouch she will keep close at hand throughout the crossing. She knows that seasickness will claim many of them within the first day, and she has prepared bundles of dried ginger root and peppermint, though there is only so much any healer can do against the relentless roll of the open sea. Brynjolf carries his tools aboard himself, his hammers, his tongs, his small anvil, his carefully wrapped bundles of raw iron stock. He has packed them with the same precision he brings to his work at the forge, each piece nested against the next so that nothing shifts, nothing clangs. He has no one to say goodbye to on this shore. His goodbyes were said long ago, in a country across the sea, in a language these people do not speak. He settles his tools in the hull and finds a place to sit, and he waits. Erika helps Vigdis aboard. The older woman's step is sure, but the gap between the shore and the ship's side is wide, and the hull rocks beneath them. Erika goes first, turns and extends her hand. Vigdis takes it, not because she needs to, but because it is their way. They find a place near the stern where the rocking is gentlest, and Vigdis wraps a heavy wool cloak around them both. Sigrid is the last aboard. He stands on the shore for a long moment, looking back at the farmstead, the long, low hall, the outbuildings, the fields, the familiar line of the mountains against the sky. Randveig is already aboard, watching him from the ship. She does not call out to him. She simply waits, knowing that he needs this moment and that it will end when it needs to. He turns, he wades into the shallows, he pulls himself up over the side of the knarr, and Olver, at the steering oar, gives the signal. The sail is raised. The wool catches the wind with a sound like a deep, slow breath. The ship moves. The shore recedes. The fjord opens into the wider sea, and just like that, the old life is behind them. There is a particular quality to the open ocean that is difficult to describe unless you have experienced it. It is not simply large. It is the absence of everything that is not water and sky. Once the coastline of Norway sinks below the horizon behind them, there is nothing, no landmark, no reference point, no sense of scale. The world becomes a gray circle of sea and a gray dome of cloud, and the ship is the only solid thing in existence. The first day passes in a haze of adjustment. The livestock settle uneasily. Several of the travelers are sick almost immediately, hunched over the sides of the ship or curled miserably among the cargo. Dalla moves among them, offering what comfort she can, a sip of warm water steeped with herbs, a cool cloth on a fevered brow, a quiet word. There is little else to be done. The body must find its own balance with the motion of the sea, and for some, this takes days. Erica, to everyone's surprise, is not sick. She sits beside Vigdis, wrapped in their shared cloak, and watches the waves with fascination. She has never seen the open ocean before. She has never been anywhere where the land was not visible. The enormity of it does not frighten her. It interests her. She watches the way the waves move in patterns, the way the wind changes the texture of the water's surface, the way a seabird can hang motionless in the air for long minutes, riding a current invisible to human eyes. Vigdis watches her watching and smiles to herself. The girl has a navigator's eye, whether she knows it or not. Olver stands at the stern, one hand on the steering oar, and he is in his element. His gaze moves constantly, sky, water, horizon, sky, reading a text that only he can fully understand. He has made this crossing before, years ago, on a trading voyage, and he carries the route in his memory like a song learned in childhood. They will sail northwest, keeping the Faroe Islands to their south, following the edge of a deep ocean current that the Norse call the Hafstraumur. If the winds are fair, they will sight the eastern coast of Iceland in 7 or 8 days. If the winds turn foul, it may take longer. Olver does not worry about this. He simply reads the sea and adjusts. On the second day, the clouds break for a time, and Olver takes out his solarstein. He holds the pale crystal to the sky, turning it slowly until a faint yellow pattern appears within the stone, a cross of light that shifts as he rotates it, pointing always toward the hidden sun. This is how the Norse navigate without a compass, without charts, without any of the instruments that later centuries will invent. They navigate by observation, by memory, and by a willingness to trust the world to reveal its secrets to those who watch carefully enough. Randveig brings him water and a piece of dried fish, and they exchange a few words about the weather, the wind, the state of the animals. Olver tells her they are making good time. She nods and returns to the main body of the ship, where she has been organizing the supplies, checking the lashings, making sure that everyone has eaten and that the water barrels are being rationed sensibly. Even at sea, Ranveig is managing a household. The days pass. The rhythm of the ocean enters the body, becomes the body's rhythm. Wake, eat, watch the sea, sleep, wake again. The boundary between day and night softens. This far north, in late summer, the sky never fully darkens, and the light takes on a pearly amber quality that seems to belong to no particular hour. Time becomes a feeling rather than a measurement. On the third night, though night is generous, for the sky is merely a deeper shade of gray, Vigdis tells a story. She does not stand or announce it. She simply begins speaking in the same low, steady voice she uses with Erika, and gradually the others draw near to listen. She tells the story of the Nornir, the three sisters who sit at the base of Yggdrasil, the great ash tree at the center of the world, how Urdur tends the well of memory, drawing up the water that nourishes the tree's roots, how Verdandi carves the runes of the present into the bark, how Skuld veils the future, never revealing what the threads will become until they are already woven. The story is not told for entertainment. It is told as a reminder that fate is not something that happens to you. Fate is the meeting place of what has been and what you choose to do about it. The threads of Orlog are laid down by the past, but the weaving belongs to the living. This is the Norse understanding of destiny, not passive, not predetermined, but an ongoing conversation between the world and the self. Erika leans against Vigdis's shoulder and listens, and the words settle into her the way rain settles into earth, slowly, deeply, without resistance. On the sixth morning, Olver sees something that makes him go still. A fulmar, a stout gray seabird, crosses the bow of the ship, heading northwest, then another, then a third. Fulmars do not fly far from land. Their presence means that somewhere ahead, beyond the curve of the sea, there is solid ground. He says nothing yet. He watches. Over the next few hours, the signs multiply. The color of the water changes subtly from deep Atlantic gray to something with a faint green undertone, the signature of shallower seas, of nutrients rising from the seabed. The swell pattern shifts, the long rolling waves of the open ocean giving way to shorter, choppier movements as the water feels the influence of a distant coastline. A scent arrives on the wind, not land exactly, not yet, but something different from the pure salt of the deep sea. Something mineral, something volcanic, something alive. And then, late in the afternoon of the seventh day, Olver sees it. A thin, dark line on the northwestern horizon, barely distinguishable from the cloud above it. He watches it for a long time, making sure it does not dissolve, making sure it is not a trick of the light. It does not dissolve. It grows. He speaks one word to Sigrid, and Sigrid turns to look, and a moment later the whole ship knows. People rise from where they have been sitting or sleeping, and they crowd to the bow, and they look. Some of them weep, some of them laugh. Most simply stare, in silence, at the line of darkness that means the journey is not a dream, that the land they have been told about is real, that the gamble of their lives has not been lost. As they draw closer, the darkness resolves into shape, mountains, vast, angular, unlike anything they have seen in Norway. These are younger mountains, volcanic, with sharp ridges and broad, flat tops capped in white. Below the snow line, there are slopes of green and brown, and below that, a coastline of black rock and dark sand. There are no buildings, no harbors, no smoke, no sign that any human being has ever stood on these shores. Vigdis murmurs something to Erika, an old phrase, half prayer, half observation. She tells the girl that they are looking at a land that has no memory yet. No urlog has been laid down here. No threads have been woven. Everything that happens on this shore will be the first thing that has ever happened here. Erika considers this, and then she asks, very quietly, if that means they get to choose what the threads will be. Vigdis looks at her for a long moment. Then she nods. The knarr cannot land directly on the rocky shore, so Olver guides it into the mouth of a shallow bay, where a river of glacial meltwater meets the sea. The water here is calmer, and the beach is made of fine, dark, volcanic sand, strange underfoot, unlike any soil they have known. Sigrid is the first to step ashore, as is his right and his duty as Godi. He stands for a moment with his feet in the wet sand, feeling the solidity of the earth after 7 days of constant motion. The ground seems to sway beneath him, a trick of the body still tuned to the rhythm of the waves. And then he does something that connects this moment to a tradition older than anyone aboard can remember. He takes the high seat pillars, the ondugi, carved with the faces of Freyr and Freya, and he carries them to the water's edge, and he casts them into the bay. Wherever they wash ashore, that is where the gods wish them to settle. The land spirits, the landvater, the unseen guardians of every place, will guide the pillars to the right location. This is an act of faith and an act of humility. It says, we do not presume to choose. We ask and we listen. The pillars bob in the gray water and drift slowly northward along the coast, carried by a gentle current. Sigrid watches them go, and then he turns to the work at hand, because faith alone does not build a settlement. Work does. The animals are brought ashore first, stumbling, stiff-legged, bewildered by the new smells and the feel of solid ground. The sheep scatter immediately and begin to crop the grass, which is thick and rich, as the travelers were promised. The cows are more cautious, standing close together, their breath steaming in the cool air. The horses shake themselves and wander toward the river to drink. Then the supplies, cask after cask, bundle after bundle, carried up the beach and laid out on the grass above the tide line. The tools, the seeds, the iron stock, the household goods, the medicines, the food stores. It takes most of the day, and by the time the ship is empty, everyone is exhausted but alert, their senses sharpened by the strangeness of this place. Dalla walks inland a short distance, examining the plants she finds. She does not recognize all of them, but she recognizes some, wild thyme, growing low among the rocks, and a species of moss she knows to be useful for packing wounds. There are berries she does not trust, and she will need to test them carefully. But the soil smells healthy, and the air is clean, and the water from the river, when she tastes it, is cold and sweet. She feels a cautious hope. Brynjolf finds a piece of the dark volcanic rock and turns it in his hands, examining its weight, its grain, its hardness. He is already thinking about what he will need: a place to build a forge, a source of fuel, a supply of bog iron for smelting. He knows that everything they build here will depend on iron, the nails for the houses, the blades for the tools, the rivets for any future ships. He is, in a very real sense, the one who will make the physical settlement possible. Erika stands apart from the others, looking not at the mountains or the river or the strange black sand, but at the sky. It is enormous here, The horizon is so wide and so flat that the sky seems to take up more of the world than the land does. In Norway, the mountains hemmed the sky in, made it something you looked up at through a gap. Here, it presses down from every direction, vast and open and faintly terrifying in its scale. Vigdis comes to stand beside her. She does not say anything for a while. Then she tells Erika that the sky will not always feel so large. The girl will grow into it, the way a young tree grows into the space above it. For now, it is enough to stand here and breathe. The first task, the most urgent task, is shelter. They have arrived in late summer, but the Icelandic autumn comes quickly, and the winter behind it is not something you survive in the open. Every day of fair weather is a gift, and it must not be wasted. Sigrid organizes the work with the quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to leading. There is no shouting, no urgency in his voice. He simply identifies what needs to be done, assigns people to do it, and trusts them to do it well. This is the quality that makes him a Godi, not force, but trust, and the kind of calm that makes other people calm. The longhouse will be built in the Norse way, adapted to this new land. In Norway, they would have used timber for the frame and walls. Here, timber is scarce. There are birch trees in the lowlands, but they are small and scrubby, nothing like the great pines and oaks of home. So they will build as the land requires, a frame of driftwood and birch with walls of turf. The turf house, Torfbear, is an ingenious thing. The builders begin by laying a foundation of flat stones gathered from the riverbed and the shore, fitted together with the patience of a puzzle. Upon this, a wooden frame is raised, the skeleton of the house outlining its shape, its doorways, its internal divisions. The frame does not need to be massive because the walls themselves will bear much of the weight. And those walls are made of the living earth. Blocks of turf, called klambrar, are cut from the meadow in long, thick strips, each one a mat of soil and tangled grass roots. These blocks are stacked in a herringbone pattern, grass side down, layer upon layer, until the walls are a full arm's length thick. The grass roots bind the blocks together as they settle, and the thickness of the walls creates insulation so effective that a single hearth can warm the entire hall, even in the deepest cold. Brynjolf is essential during this phase. Every joint in the wooden frame requires iron nails or rivets. The door hinges, the latch, the supports for the roof beams, all of these are iron, and all of them come from Brynjolf's hands. He has set up a temporary forge on the river bank, just a pit of charcoal with a bellows made from a leather bag, and his anvil set on a flat stone. It is rough, improvised, nothing like the proper smithy he will build later. But it works. The ring of his hammer on iron becomes the heartbeat of the settlement, steady and constant from dawn until the light fades. Erika works alongside the adults, carrying stones, stacking turf blocks, fetching water for those who are thirsty. She does not complain, and she does not need to be told what to do next. She watches, and she sees where help is needed, and she goes there. Vigdis works too, though her contributions are less physical. She is the one who remembers how the old halls were laid out in Norway, where the hearth should go in relation to the door so that the smoke draws properly, how wide the sleeping platform should be, where to place the storage alcoves so that the food stays cool and dry. Her memory is the blueprint they are building from. The roof goes on last, a layer of birch bark for waterproofing, then more turf on top, thick and green. When it is finished, the longhouse looks almost like a part of the landscape itself, a low green mound rising from the meadow, with only the wooden door frame and the thin trail of smoke from the roof hole to indicate that it is a human dwelling. The whole process takes several weeks, and by the time it is done, the light is noticeably shorter, the air noticeably colder. Autumn has arrived. There is a moment, on the evening the longhouse is completed, that no one in the settlement will ever forget. Sigrid builds the first fire in the new hearth. He uses dry birch bark for tinder, scraps of driftwood for kindling, and larger pieces of birch and dried peat for fuel. He strikes the fire steel against the flint, and the sparks fall into the tinder, and he bends low and breathes on them gently, steadily, the way you coax something fragile into life. The flame catches, it grows, it spreads from the tinder to the kindling, from the kindling to the wood, and suddenly the hearth is alive, the fire crackling and popping, sending shadows leaping across the new walls and the new roof beams and the faces of the people gathered around it. The warmth is immediate, almost startling after weeks of working in the cold. It radiates outward from the hearth like a living thing, filling the hall, soaking into the turf walls, warming the stone floor. The smoke rises to the roof hole and slips out into the darkening sky, and the smell of it, wood smoke and peat, the oldest and most comforting smell in the world, fills the space and makes it, for the first time, feel like a home. Randveig hangs a pot over the fire and begins to prepare a meal, a simple stew of dried mutton, barley, and wild herbs that Dalla gathered earlier in the day. The smell of cooking food mingles with the wood smoke, and something in the room shifts. People relax, shoulders drop, voices soften, someone laughs, the first real laughter since landfall. Sigrid places the high seat pillars, which his men found washed ashore on a sandy headland a few miles to the north, just where the current carried them, on either side of his seat at the head of the hall. Friar and Freya look out over the room with their carved wooden eyes, and the firelight makes them seem almost alive. The household is complete. The pillars have found their place, and so have the people. Erika sits close to the fire, closer than she needs to, letting the heat soak into her hands and her face. Vigdis sits beside her, and for the first time since they left Norway, the old woman's expression softens into something that might, from a certain angle, be called peace. Dalla eats quietly, already thinking about what she will need to prepare for the winter, which teas to brew for coughs, which salves to make for the cracked and bleeding hands that will come with the cold. She has been studying the local plants with increasing interest, and she has found several that she believes will be useful, though she will test them carefully on herself before giving them to anyone else. Brynjolf sits near the door, slightly apart from the others, as is his habit, but he is eating the same food, warming himself at the same fire, and when Randveig brings him a second bowl of stew without being asked, he looks up at her with an expression that says more than words. The weeks that follow are consumed by preparation. The Norse have a saying, one of many collected in the old poem called the Havamal, the words of the High One, that goes, "A man should be watchful and wary, and slow to put trust in a friend. But once trust is given, let it hold." In these early weeks, trust is what the settlement runs on. Trust that the work will be shared fairly. Trust that the food will last. Trust that the decisions Sigrid makes are sound, The animals must be tended. The sheep are left to graze on the open hillsides, where the grass, though beginning to brown, is still plentiful. The cows are kept closer in a small byre attached to the longhouse, where their body heat will help warm the building through the winter. Hay must be cut and dried and stored, as much as can be gathered before the frosts come. This is exhausting, repetitive, essential work, and everyone does it, from Sigrid to the youngest child. Dalla ventures farther afield each day, mapping the landscape in her mind, noting where each useful plant grows. She finds bilberries on the lower slopes, and crowberries, and a small aromatic plant she identifies as Icelandic thyme. She finds angelica growing by the river, a plant she knows well from Norway, one that can be used for stomach ailments, for flavoring food, and for a warming tea that will be welcome in the cold months. She dries what she gathers and stores it in the longhouse, in small linen bags hung from the roof beams, where the smoke will keep the insects away. Olver, his work as navigator complete, turns to other tasks. He is a skilled carpenter. Navigation and woodworking are closely related arts, both requiring an intimate understanding of grain and weather and the behavior of materials under stress. He builds the sleeping platforms along the walls of the longhouse, raised above the floor for warmth, wide enough for two people to sleep side by side. He builds a simple table and benches and a frame for drying fish. His hands are never still. Erika has taken on the task of learning the land. Each day she walks a little farther from the settlement, memorizing the shape of the hills, the course of the streams, the location of the bird colonies on the cliffs. She finds the tracks of Arctic foxes in the sand, the only land animal native to this island, and she watches them from a distance, fascinated by their quick, alert movements. She reports what she finds to Vigdis each evening, and Vigdis listens and asks questions, and helps her build a mental map of their new home. One afternoon, Erika discovers something remarkable: a hot spring hidden in a shallow depression about a half-hour's walk from the settlement. The water rises from the earth steaming, collecting in a natural pool lined with smooth stones. The smell is faintly sulphurous, the water a milky blue-green. She puts her hand in and pulls it back. It is hot, genuinely hot, hotter than any water she has ever touched that was not heated by a fire. She runs back to tell the others, and that evening several of them walk out to see it. They stand around the steaming pool in the cool autumn air, and there is a moment of quiet wonder. The earth here is alive in a way they have never experienced. It breathes, it warms, it gives heat freely, without needing to be fed fuel or tended. Dalla sees the hot spring and immediately understands its value, not just for bathing, but for healing. Warm water eases aching joints, loosens stiff muscles, soothes the skin. She resolves to bring anyone who is unwell here through the winter, as often as the weather allows. Sigrid sees it and thinks of something else entirely. He thinks of the landvetter, the spirits of the land, and he wonders if this is a sign of their welcome. The earth itself, offering warmth to the strangers who have come to live upon it. He does not say this aloud, but that evening he makes a small offering at the edge of the spring, a piece of bread, a splash of the mead they have been carefully rationing, and he speaks a quiet word of thanks. And then the winter comes. It does not arrive all at once. It seeps in day by day, like water finding its way through stone. First, the light changes. The days grow short, then shorter still, until the sun barely clears the southern horizon before beginning its descent. The sky takes on a heavy, low quality, the clouds pressing down like a wool blanket drawn over the world. The temperatures drop slowly at first, then with sudden, sharp plunges that leave ice on the water barrels and frost on the turf walls. The first snowfall comes in late October. It is light, almost tentative, a scattering of white on the black volcanic sand and the brown grass. But it does not melt. More follows, and within a few weeks the landscape is transformed. The mountains disappear behind curtains of white. The river slows, its edges icing over, the water dark and heavy between the frozen banks. The wind picks up, not the gentle breezes of summer, but a hard, steady, biting wind that finds every gap in clothing, every crack in the longhouse walls, every exposed inch of skin. Inside the longhouse, the household draws together. The fire is kept burning constantly now, fed with peat and dried dung and whatever driftwood can be gathered from the shore. The smoke hangs in the upper half of the room, a permanent haze that stings the eyes and flavors everything with its smell. The animals in the byre shift and breathe, their warmth seeping through the turf wall into the living space. The days take on a rhythm that is both monotonous and oddly comforting. Rise in the dark, feed the fire, feed the animals, eat, work at whatever indoor task needs doing, mending tools, repairing clothing, processing wool, eat again, talk if there is talk to be had, sleep. Dalla is busy throughout the winter. The cold brings ailments, coughs that settle deep in the chest, joints that swell and ache, skin that cracks and bleeds in the dry air. She brews teas of angelica and thyme. She makes salves of rendered fat mixed with crushed herbs. She wraps hot stones in cloth and places them against aching backs. She does not have everything she needs. There are plants that grew in Norway that do not grow here, remedies she cannot replicate. But she adapts, as all of them are adapting, finding new solutions for new problems. Brynjolf uses the winter to build a proper smithy, a separate structure, small but well ventilated, with a stone-lined forge pit and a proper chimney hole. When the worst of the weather keeps everyone indoors, he works at smaller tasks, sharpening blades, mending a cracked pot, fashioning new nails from the iron stock he is slowly smelting from the bog ore he has found in a marshy area near the river. He has discovered that Icelandic bog iron is good, rich and workable, with fewer impurities than he expected. This pleases him quietly, the way a craftsman is pleased when his material cooperates. One afternoon, Erika comes to watch him work. She is fascinated by the process, the way the raw, crumbly ore is transformed by heat and force into something strong and useful. Brynjolf does not speak much, but he does not send her away. He lets her work the bellows for a time, showing her the rhythm, slow and steady, feeding air to the coals the way you feed breath to a fire you're trying to keep alive. Erika learns quickly, and Brynjolf gives her a small nod of approval. It is the beginning of something, not an apprenticeship exactly, but a quiet exchange of knowledge between two people who are both, in their different ways, outsiders. In the deep middle of winter there comes a night that is the longest of the year, the winter solstice, the turning point when the darkness reaches its greatest depth and then, imperceptibly at first, begins to recede. The Norse call this time Jol, Yule, and it is one of the most important moments in their spiritual calendar. Sigrid marks it with a small ceremony. There is no grand feast. Their supplies are too carefully rationed for that, but Randve has set aside a small store of mead and a piece of dried lamb that has been saved for this occasion. The household gathers around the hearth, and Sigrid speaks. He does not give a speech. He simply speaks, the way a father speaks to his family about where they are and how far they have come. He speaks of the crossing and the courage it required. He speaks of the work they have done and the home they have built. He speaks of the darkness and of the light that is coming. And he speaks of the Nornir once more, of how the threads of their lives have been woven to this place, to this night, to this fire, and how the weaving is not finished, and how they must continue to do their part. Vigdis adds something in her quiet way. She tells the household that in the old understanding, the solstice is not just the longest night. It is the moment when the world turns. Like a ship at the farthest point of its journey, the world pauses here in the deepest dark, and then it begins to come back. The light returns. It always returns. This is the oldest promise in the world, older than the gods themselves. Erika sits in the firelight and listens, and she holds these words the way she holds all of Vigdis's words, carefully, seriously, as things that are worth keeping. Later, when the mead has been drunk and the lamb has been shared and the others have settled into sleep, Dalla steps outside alone. The sky is clear for once, and the stars are extraordinary, more stars than she has ever seen, a river of light spilling across the black dome of the sky. And then, as she watches, something else appears, a faint green shimmer on the northern horizon, like light reflected off water. It grows, brightens, ripples. It becomes a curtain of pale green and white, shifting and dancing across the sky in silence, as though the heavens themselves are breathing. She has heard of this, the northern lights, the fires of the sky, but she has never seen them so clearly, so close. She stands in the snow and watches until the cold drives her back inside, and she does not tell anyone what she has seen. Some things are too large for words. They simply settle into you and become part of what you know. January passes. February passes. The days grow longer, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to notice. Each morning the light arrives a few minutes earlier. Each evening it lingers a few minutes more. The change is so gradual that you cannot see it happening, only realize, looking back, that it has happened. The first sign of spring is not warmth. Warmth is still weeks away. It is sound. The river begins to move more freely, the ice cracking and shifting with a deep, resonant groaning that can be heard from inside the longhouse. The birds return, or appear, for many of them have been here all winter, hidden, and the air fills with their calls. The sheep, who have been huddled in the byre for months, begin to push at the door, restless, sensing the change. Randveig walks out one morning and sees something that stops her in her tracks, a single blade of green grass pushing up through the snow at the base of the longhouse wall. It is such a small thing. It is everything. She goes back inside and tells the others, and there is a moment of quiet gladness in the hall. Not celebration exactly, but a shared exhale. They have survived. The first winter is behind them. Whatever comes next, they have proven that it is possible to live here, to endure, to continue. Sigrid begins to plan the spring planting. The barley and oat seeds they brought from Norway have been stored carefully through the winter, kept dry and cool in sealed containers. He walks the land around the settlement, examining the soil, feeling it between his fingers, judging where the drainage is best and where the sun falls most warmly. He has never farmed this soil before, and there will be mistakes, and he knows this. But the land is good. He can feel it. Dalla has already begun her spring work, gathering the first new growth of angelica and thyme, checking the birch trees for the sap that will begin to flow as the days warm. She has spent the winter learning this landscape's rhythms, and she is beginning to understand its generosity. Iceland does not give easily, but it gives steadily to those who know where to look. Brynjolf emerges from his smithy with a collection of new tools: hoes for turning the soil, sickles for cutting hay, a set of rivets for repairing the ship. He lays them out on a flat stone in the spring sunlight, and they gleam dully, dark iron against gray stone, and there is something deeply satisfying about the sight of them. These are the instruments of a future. These are the things that will turn a campsite into a community. As the spring advances, something else begins to happen, something less visible than the greening of the fields or the lengthening of the days, but perhaps more important. The people of the settlement begin to change, not in dramatic ways, in small, quiet ways. The hierarchy that was so clear in Norway, Godi and farmhand, free person and thrall, begins to soften at the edges, not disappear. These are deeply ingrained structures, and they will persist for generations yet. But in a place where everyone's labor is equally necessary, where the ironworker's skill is as vital as the chieftain's judgment, the distances between people narrow. Brynjolf eats at the same hearth now, not near the door. This happened gradually, without announcement. Randveig simply began setting his place closer to the fire, and no one objected. And after a while, it was simply the way things were. He still does not speak much, but when he does, people listen, because what he says is usually about something that matters: the quality of the iron, the state of the tools, the best way to split a stone. Eureka has become something between a student and a bridge. She moves easily between all the members of the household, learning from each of them. She helps Dalla sort herbs. She works the bellows for Brynjolf. She sits with Olver and learns how to read the weather by the shape of the clouds. She carries messages for Sigrid when he is organizing the spring work. She is not aware that she is doing anything unusual. She is simply being useful, being attentive, being Erika. But Vigdis watches, and she sees something taking shape in the girl, a kind of connector, a person who holds the threads between other people. One evening, Vigdis tells Erika that in the old stories, the Nornir do not only weave fate for great kings and heroes, they weave for everyone, for the farmer and the thrall, the healer and the child. Every life is a thread, and every thread matters to the pattern. If you pull one out, the whole cloth changes. Erika thinks about this. Then she asks if the Nornir ever make mistakes. Vigdis is quiet for a long time. Then she says that she does not think the Nornir think in terms of mistakes. They think in terms of patterns. Some patterns are painful, some are beautiful, most are both. The important thing is not to judge the pattern, but to weave your own thread as strongly and as truly as you can. By late spring, the settlement has begun to take on a permanent shape. Other structures have gone up around the longhouse, a storehouse for the grain and dried food, Brynjolf's smithy, a smaller dwelling for one of the other families. Paths have been worn between the buildings, beaten into the earth by daily feet. A fence of stacked stones encloses the home field where the barley is beginning to show its first pale green shoots. Sigrid has also begun to reach out to other settlers. They are not alone on this island. Other groups from Norway have landed on other parts of the coast, each one staking out its own claim, building its own settlement. Word travels slowly here, carried by the occasional traveler or by men sent out to explore, but it travels, and Sigrid knows that for any of them to thrive, they will need to cooperate, to trade, to establish the kind of legal and social structures that prevent disputes from becoming blood feuds. This is the seed of what will eventually become the Althing, the great assembly of all Iceland, one of the world's earliest parliaments, where free men will gather each summer to make laws, settle disputes, and govern themselves without a king. That institution is still decades away, but its roots are here in the simple recognition that people who share a land must find a way to share a peace. Rannveig sees to the daily workings of this growing community with the same steady hand she brought to the farm in Norway. She mediates the small frictions that arise when people live closely together. Who gets the best sleeping spot? Who has been eating more than their share? Whose dog will not stop barking in the night? These are not dramatic conflicts. They are the ordinary abrasions of human life, and Rannveig smooths them with patience and fairness, and occasionally with a firmness that no one is inclined to argue with. The days are long now. In midsummer, the sun barely sets at all. It dips to the horizon and then rises again, painting the sky in colors that seem to belong to another world. Pink and gold and pale, translucent green, layered above the mountains like a painting made of light. The air smells of grass and wildflowers and the faint, clean scent of glacial ice carried on the breeze. In these long, bright evenings the household gathers outside, sitting on the stones or the grass, and there is a gentleness to these hours that feels like a gift. The work is done for the day, the animals are settled. The children, for there are a few other children in the settlement now, play among the rocks while the adults talk in low voices about the harvest, the weather, the news from the other settlements along the coast. Dalla tends a small garden she has established near the hot spring, where the warmth of the earth extends the growing season by a few precious weeks. She is growing angelica and thyme, and she has experimented with a few other plants, some successfully, some not. She has also begun to teach Erika about her craft, not the spiritual aspects, not yet, but the practical ones. Which plants ease a headache? Which ones help a wound heal cleanly? How to prepare a tea that will bring restful sleep to someone who cannot find it on their own. And so the days pass, one into the next, as the first year in Iceland draws toward its close. The barley grows, the sheep multiply, the iron rings under Brynjolf's hammer, the walls of the Torfbear settle and thicken, growing stronger as the roots knit themselves together. The settlement is becoming a home. Let us pause here as the light begins to soften and the year turns once more toward autumn. Let us rest with these people for a moment in this place they have made. What Sigrid found in Iceland was not what he expected. He expected freedom, and he found it. Freedom from the king's hand, freedom to govern his own affairs, freedom to build without asking permission. But he also found something he did not expect, a deepened sense of responsibility. Without a king above him, the weight of every decision falls on his own shoulders, and he carries it with a seriousness that has made him, in some ways, a better leader than he was in Norway. He has learned that authority is not a possession, it is a practice, renewed each day through fairness and care. What Randveig found was confirmation of something she already knew, that a home is made by the people within it and by the attention they pay to each other. She has built a household here that functions as smoothly as the one she left behind, and she has done it with fewer resources in a harsher climate, among people who were tired and frightened and far from everything they knew. She does not think of this as remarkable. She thinks of it as what needed to be done. What Olver found was rest, not the rest of inactivity. He is as busy as anyone, but the rest of arrival. He spent his whole life in motion, always looking toward the next horizon, and now, for the first time, he is somewhere he wants to stay. He has built a small dwelling near the shore where he can hear the sea at night, and he is content. What Dalla found was a new landscape of healing, different plants, different ailments, different rhythms of sickness and health. She is learning Iceland the way she learned Norway, one plant at a time, one patient at a time, one season at a time. She knows she will never stop learning, and this does not trouble her. It is, in fact, the thing that keeps her most alive. What Brynjolf found was a version of freedom he had been promised but never quite believed in. He is still, technically, a thrall. That status does not vanish overnight. But in this place, where his skill is the difference between survival and failure, the gap between his standing and anyone else's has narrowed to almost nothing. He eats at the hearth. He is consulted on decisions that affect the settlement. He is building a life with his own hands, in the most literal sense possible. And when Sigrid speaks of the day when Brynjolf will be granted his full freedom, it no longer sounds like a distant promise. It sounds like something that is already, quietly, becoming true. What Vigdis found was a final purpose. She is old, and she knows that her remaining years are few, but she also knows that everything she carries, the stories, the laws, the genealogies, the old wisdom, is needed here more than it was ever needed in Norway. In Norway there were many who remembered. Here there is only her, and Erika, and so she pours everything she has into the girl, like water into a vessel, trusting that it will be held. And what Erika found was the thing she had been missing since her parents died, a sense of belonging, not to a place, she is still learning this place, but to a web of people who need her, who teach her, who see her not as an orphan to be pitied, but as a person to be shaped. She is growing into something, and she does not yet know what it is, but she can feel it happening, the way you can feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, even with your eyes closed. And now the second autumn is beginning, and the light is shortening again, and the air carries that familiar bite that says winter is on its way. But this time, there's no fear in it. The stores are fuller, the walls are stronger, the people know the land better, and the land, in its quiet way, has begun to know them. In the longhouse, the fire burns steadily. The smoke rises through the roof hole into the darkening sky. Outside, the wind moves over the grass and the stones, carrying the sound of the river and the distant bleating of sheep on the hillside. The mountains stand as they have always stood, patient and immense, white-capped and silent, Let yourself be here now, in this warmth. Let the firelight play across the walls. Let the sound of quiet voices settle over you like a blanket. Vigdis is telling a story. Her voice is low and rhythmic, the cadence of someone who has told 10,000 stories and knows exactly how to let each word find its weight. Erika is beside her, leaning against her shoulder, her eyes half closed. The others are around them, Ranveig mending a garment by the light of a tallow lamp, Sigrid whittling a piece of birch into something that may become a toy or a tool, Dalla grinding dried herbs with slow circular motions of her stone pestle, Olver dozing with his back against the wall, Brynjolf sharpening a blade with long, even strokes of his whetstone. Vigdis tells the story of the world tree, Yggdrasil, the great ash that stands at the center of everything, its branches reaching into the heavens, its roots plunging into the wells of wisdom and fate and memory. She tells of how the tree is always growing and always dying at the same time, nourished by the water the Nornir pour over its roots each day, but gnawed by the serpent that coils beneath them. Life and decay, growth and loss, held together in the same living thing. This is the way of the world, she says. Nothing lasts forever, and nothing is ever truly lost. Everything is woven into the pattern, and the pattern continues. Her voice grows softer. Erika's breathing has slowed. The fire crackles and settles. The wind outside is a low, steady murmur, like the breath of the land itself. And so we leave them here, these ordinary people who did an extraordinary thing. They crossed an ocean. They built a home from nothing. They carried their gods, their stories, their laws, and their love across 1,000 miles of gray water and set them down in a land that had never known a human footprint. They did not do it because they were heroes. They did it because they were human, and because the thread of their fate led them here, and because they had the courage to follow it. The fire burns low. The longhouse is warm. The night is long and dark and quiet, and everyone is safe.